Hello YouTube, and today I will be doing my second version of my Java tutorial. So we will be using Linux in this tutorial. It don't really matter, Java is quite adaptive due to your operating system. So for our IDE, we will be using Eclipse. So first we'll go through downloading Eclipse, which is really simple. I mean, anybody can figure it out. So just search Eclipse Java, not Eclipse Java logo. So go down to Eclipse IDE. So they recently released a Eclipse installer. I personally am not a big fan of it. I am currently trying it, but I don't really like it so far. So if you don't want to download it with the installer, you can just go ahead and download it via this method. If for some reason it's displaying the wrong operating system, you could just switch that. So if you're using Windows, go ahead and download it. And it'll come in a zip file. And all you gotta do is just extract that zip file. So yeah. So I'll go ahead and show you real quick here how to get it set up for Linux. Oh crap, download and install, wrong button, bell. So you just click the download button. You go ahead and wait for that. Get your terminal window open. Let me unpause Steam here because it's downloading a crap ton of games. And that should speed up massively. I hope it don't take 7 hours. Okay, so the Wi-Fi, the internet here is going to shit, so that's not going to be downloaded anytime soon. So you just download that, and then if you're running Linux, to extract the tarball, you just type in tar.-xf and then the name of the file, and it'll download to your downloads directory most likely, unless you specify otherwise. So go ahead into our Java programming, like our installation directory, and it comes with a default icon if you're really into icons. Same for the C++ IDE, which we won't be using the C++ IDE for obvious reasons. And the installation is basically universal, so you go ahead and install the Eclipse, and all you gotta do is just double click on this, or if you're running Linux, you can open in terminal here and okay, technical difficulties. Yeah, it's all the way down there for some reason. Just go ahead and call directory into. You can just go /Eclipse. However you prefer to open your files, that's your thing. But, I mean, you could just double click it. And I'm currently using Eclipse Oxygen, but the setting up a workspace and everything is basically universal, no matter what version of Eclipse you're running. So that's not going to be an issue, most likely. And if you do have an issue, just comment in the comments section and I'll get to fixing it. So we'll go ahead. So all workspace is it's just a folder where you keep all of your files. That's literally it. And how do you make a folder that you keep all your files? You just make the folder. It's not very complex. So I just created that folder Java tutorial, and we could just go ahead and select that. And since I use a lot of different workspaces, we won't be using this as default. But if you're only going to use one workspace, which I highly don't recommend because it could get very cluttered due to all your testing projects and stuff like that. So we'll just go ahead and check this if you want to use a single workspace. But I personally prefer having multiple workspaces for multiple things. Like if I'm going to be writing Minecraft mods, I'll have a whole entire workspace just for Minecraft modding. And I could just go ahead and show you that. So here I have libgdx, Logisim, Minecraft, YOMSP430. that's C++, so Java and GitHub. So all we gotta do is click launch, and Eclipse does have fairly bad loading times compared to other IDEs. If you've ever used IntelliJ IDEA, its loading times are insanely fast compared to this. And I think my recording software just killed itself. Oh, never mind, my recording software is fine. So we'll go ahead, and if you didn't see what I done, all I done is I clicked on the Workbench button in here, and this looks all confusing. In 90% of my projects, I don't use the task list or the outline, but they can be convenient. Problems, Java doc, and declaration, these will not be used for today. So what we could do is we could just go ahead and we'll just replace this with something like console. Why would we replace this with console? Because that's what we're going to be working with. So now we have some displays here. We have this one blank area. This is where your code's going to be shown, and also you can add whatever you want anywhere. Then you have this thing called the Package Explorer. The Package Explorer sounds really fancy, but all it is it's basically a file explorer like you would use in Windows or whatever. So now we have all these complex things, and you probably never even heard of any of these words in day-to-day life. Actually, probably like enum. I mean, nobody ever uses that. But once we go into it, it's going to be really simple and not very complex. So we'll start creating a Java project. Now, what's a Java project? Well, it's a Java project. So we'll call this tutorial. We'll call this 1. Or we could call it 0. A lot of programmers will start their numbering at 0. And I'm going to start my numbering at 0 because that will get you a feel to how numbering works in programming, as well as how people just do it. So if you're really picky, you can have your own project-specific Java runtime environment, but you will most likely in 90% of your use in your projects never use a project-specific Java runtime environment. Now, you can also just use the default, or you could use the one that comes with Eclipse. So, if one comes with Eclipse, go ahead and use that. I prefer it because it's more modern. And depending on your application, you might want to use something slightly outdated. If it's targeted for more older people, you might want to use something like 1.6 because nobody updates their Java. A lot of people do not update Java. But for this, we're going to use Java 1.8. So this right here, it honestly don't matter because, I mean, you can change this, but it just gets confusing when you're like going through your project. I prefer that. So use default location. If you want a fancy location, you can add that. Add project to working sets, that really don't matter. So we can just go ahead and click next. Now you can click finish, but I would like to go through the rest of these menus. So this folder here, this is going to be your source folder. Let's say you want another source folder, you can go ahead and add that. So you can add multiple source folders, and you can link in other projects. So let's say you made a program that adds in a bunch of cool features. Well, you could just go ahead and import that and use that program with the program we're writing right now. Libraries, let's say you're using a library such as JSerialCom because you want to talk to your Arduino. Well, you can go ahead and add that in with this menu. Order and export, this really don't matter and I don't use it very much. And you probably won't either. Basically, it's the order of how your project is built, which we will get on more later, but you shouldn't worry about it right now. So, now this menu, we have this menu. Import, export, these buttons we will use later. Refresh, let's say instead of editing something via the console. Sorry, my computer is lagging so bad, it's because I'm installing a bunch of Steam games. So let's say you go to your projects directory, and we make a new file. It's not going to show up in here, Why isn't it showing up in here? Because it don't know that you created that new file. To fix that, you could just click refresh. And obviously I made a mistake because I didn't actually put that file inside the project file. So if I move that, and now I refresh, it should display the file. And that's because, see, we got hello.txt. And if we delete that file, well, obviously it's going to go away. We list all the files. We don't have that. Nope. So you always see we have bin and source. The source is where all of your actual code goes, and when you run your code, it creates special files that go in bin. And we'll get more on them on them types of files later. So let's create our very first program. Let's get right into business. So when we create our very first program, we get this really confusing menu. But actually, let me go through what you choose here. So there's different types of objects in Java. And you could create a class, an interface, an enumeration, an annotation, a source folder, all these fancy stuff, none of which we will be using in this particular tutorial. Later, we'll be going over interfaces, enumerations, annotations, miscellaneous jargon like that. So let's go ahead and create this class. A class is kind of your base for everything. And we'll call this Hello World for the name. Now, we also have the source folder. Let's say you have multiple folders for your code. You might want to change that to a different folder. Package. We'll get more on that later. And then modifiers, we'll explain all these later in detail. But this group of modifiers will never be used for a class that's its own file. We'll get more on that later. Abstract and final, we'll get more on that later. Superclass interfaces, again, we'll get more on that later. So we also have generate comments. This basically, it's kind of a useless thing. It's basically, do you want pre-generated comments, which I don't see a point of. So we'll go through what comments are. Public static void main. This looks really confusing, but it's not. So we have these two modifiers, public and static. Public means everything and everybody can see it. But let's actually generate this first. So it's going to generate it, and we're going to get our code here. So we start off with this one line here called public class hello world. And what this means, we're declaring an object of type hello world. So we're creating a new object, and this object is of the type hello world. Let's rephrase that. And what does this public mean? Public means it's visible to everyone. So when I say visible to everyone, what does that mean? What does it mean to be visible to everyone and everything exactly? Well, it means that if I create another object, I can reference this code here. So let's say I make a new object. We'll call this the object 9000. And I want to talk to the object hello world. So we'll go ahead and copy this in. And I'll explain what this bit of code here means in a second. But we could go ahead and say hello world. And it looks like we could do stuff here. So it's letting us do stuff to this object. And we'll get more on that later. Let's start off with basics. So now, again, visible to everyone. And it's static. So static. What does static mean? So, static means that I can't think of the best way to explain this. So, let's say you have a cat. So, a cat, right? Now, some cats might be able to jump through hoops. Some cats might be able to do tricks. I'm not very creative, but all cats can So some cats can jump through hoops, do tricks, but all cats can eat food. Well, actually, some cats can eat food, but whatever. So all cats can move. So static means everything has access to it. We'll call this static here. We'll call this dynamic. Dynamic means it can change. And there is no dynamic keyword. And I kind of made up dynamic. So if you put nothing there, it means only a certain type can do it. Only a certain type of this object can do it. So again, this hello world right here is an object. All objects can do main because it's static. But only some objects can jump. So only some objects can jump, but all of them can do main. So everything has access to it. So now we got to get on this topic of functions. Java's in every programming language has these things called functions, and I highly recommend having some kind of programming knowledge while watching this tutorial, as that will help you massively, but it is not required. So what's a function do? Let's go look at something basic here. Sorry, new installation of Linux. Double checking. Yeah, that might take a second. Okay, so I would like to go through what functions are, but again, I don't have Python. So let's kind of look at what a function does. And I want to explain this with a different programming language known as Python. So we're going to create a function called hello. Now, why am I explaining this with Python? Is because Python is much easier to read and understand because it don't have all the fancy keywords that Java does. As you know, Java has a lot of fancy special things that it has. And if I go ahead and I run this program I just made, what'd I name it? Example? Okay. If I run it, it does absolutely nothing. Why don't it do anything? Well, because this is a function, and it's not actually going to do anything unless you tell it to do something. So, if I write hello, for example, and I save, It's going to say hello world. Why does it do that? Because whenever Python reads this line of code, it knows to go over here and run this code instead. So it basically replaces this right there with this. That's essentially what it does. And I could do this as many times as I like. That's what a function is, and that's the essence of the function. And that is something you should definitely understand very well, because there's also functions in mathematics as well. There's not just functions in Java. And all functions, no matter what kind of functions, will always take an input and give you an output. So let's look at the mathematical version of a function. So let's take the function y equals x squared. Simple. So, or for example, let's make this look more like a programming language. F of x is equal to x squared. Well, this is the name of our function. The f is the name of our function. The x is the input to our function. And then equals is telling you that this little bit right here is the output. So whenever you do f of 5, f of 2, it's going to give you 4. Why? Because we're saying do f where x is equal to 2. So x is going to be 2, so 2 squared is going to equal 4. That's the essence of a function. This stays true in programming and mathematics both. So it's a core concept you definitely should have. And in Java, functions are a little bit more complex. So there's different objects in Java. So let's go through our objects here. You have some predefined objects. One of these is called the int. And an int is an integer. So it's basically a number. And then you have float. Float is a decimal. These are our most basic types, and in the next tutorial, we'll go on to some much more advanced types, and don't let that scare you. So I'm just going to put some footnotes here. Just so if you're looking at this code, you can kind of see what I'm doing. Now, let's start looking at our first type, and we'll go through these. We can ignore this for now, and we can ignore this. But before we can look at types, we still don't really understand what this part of the function is. We know what public and static mean, but we don't know what void means, and we don't know what string array args mean, right? And if you're wondering, what do the brackets mean? That's just where your code goes. And code will always go inside brackets, no matter what. And that's just how Java works. You can't get around it. Code always has to be inside brackets, and no matter what type of code, it must be encapsulated in brackets. And when I say code, I mean actual code that performs a function. Because this merely isn't really performing a function. All it's doing is it's just telling what this is. And then this right here, this isn't really performing a function. It's just telling what this is. And if you're wondering what the // it means it's ignored. And then this multiple lines are ignored, as you can see. And that's what the / and the / is. Since I never really touched that. Which is... I assume you guys... That's really basic. So, when we're looking at a function, let's look at the syntax of how functions work. So, we have a modifiers. And then, as we can see, we have this weird thing called void. We'll just write void here. Oh, fail. And then we have the name. And then we have an open parentheses. And then we have string array args. And then the brackets, as per usual. Well, let's see if we can figure out what this void means and what this string array args means. So, again, remember at Desmos, when we had a function, we always had to give an input. Well, this is our input. So, now, that kind of narrows down our search to what is string array. And we'll get to void later. So, as we can see, we have string, and then these two brackets. The two brackets mean it's an array, meaning there's multiple of them, not just one. So, we'll go ahead and add that to our types list. And I'll go ahead and mark that. Multiple of a type. And we can put anything here, really. And for now, we'll just leave that with type, like that. So, we have this, and now we can see it has an input type. So, we got input. So, we got modifiers, then void, then name, then input type, and then input. Well, remember how in Desmos, every function had an output? Same goes with Java. But with Java, you have to tell it. Again, you have to tell what type everything is. You have to tell Java what type, no matter what it is. What it is. And let's go ahead and figure out what void is. And I'll go ahead and tell you it's nothing. Literally nothing. It means it don't return anything. So it don't have an output. And let's replace that with output, because return is a more advanced concept that we'll address later. So let's go ahead and start writing the code, since we kind of got a feel for what Java looks like and how it works. So let's add some code. In Python, in a lot of programming languages, you can print like that. Well, Java's a little more specific. Remember, it has to have a type, and it has to have a reference. It has to know what you're doing exactly. So, what are we doing? We're running our program on a system. Let's go ahead and see what happens if we write that. Let's kind of look at this error we're getting. Okay, let's see what happens if... Okay, so we have a bunch of... So system is a valid thing. And we have error, input, and output that belongs to system. I'll explain more later of what that dot means. That will be in the next tutorial. This is my first take, and I'm probably never going to do a second, since that's difficult. So, system.out. So now we're saying we want system, and from system we want out, which means we want the output. And then we have a bunch of fancy stuff. And there's print and there's print line. Well, what do you think that means? So print and print LM. LN means print line. Print is just regular printing. We won't get into printf. Printf means print formatted, and I would let you research that on your own. That's, if you want to, you can research that. But I'm just going to explain print. Let's go ahead and try out printing. Let's go ahead and say hello world. Run it. Well, that's quite anticlimactic. Let's go ahead and add another line of code. See what happens. Oh man, that's a serious problem. And here you might get stuck. How do I fix this? Well, there's multiple ways to fix this. But personally, the best way that Java already has is print line. Now, print line, instead of printing hello world, it prints hello world and then a line. And that don't make a lot of sense. You have to print a line? Well, yes. A line is a specific thing, and a lot of times in programming, you'll be referring to one of these. Please don't copyright strike my video for this. But this is a great ASCII map, and I highly recommend it. So, if we look on this ASCII map, if it'll load, that is. Come on. I'm running on an Intel i7 4770K with 24 gigs of RAM. I think you can load a little faster than that. Okay, we have carriage return, line feed, end of text, end of transmission, a bunch of stuff, letters. This is how computers display text. You don't have to remember this because we have Google now. Used to, you had to remember this. Good luck. So, shift in, shift out, carriage return. In the old days, we had these things called typewriters. And typewriters were really cool because, well, you typed on them. And when you wanted to make a new line on a typewriter, you've done a carriage return. And that's essentially how you do it today. But not all computers are the same. Windows computers, for example, don't just use a carriage return. They also use a line feed. That means a line feed basically means you want to make a new line. That's literally it. So it's line feed and then a carriage return. Why the operating systems are different like that, I don't know. But if you just want that line separator, you can do system.line_separator, and Java automatically gets that for you. And even tells you. So for on Unix systems, it returns /n. On Microsoft systems, it returns /r/n. And it don't say for Solaris and whatever. But luckily there's print line where it automatically chooses the right one for you. And this can seriously matter. Because on some computers, you can be printing lines, and the computer don't recognize it's a line. And that could be a big deal. Most of the time, it honestly don't matter. But Notepad, for example, is notorious. Because a lot of times, people will just do a new line, and then it shows up everything in one line, and it's ugly as hell. And unreadable, basically. So, that's a little rant. Okay, so now that we got hello world, let's start exploring our types, because we have these fun types to play around. And let's see if we can let's see what we can do with the number. So remember, let's look at variables first. So what is a variable? A variable. Well, in math, a variable is simply a number of any type. It can be infinity, but computers don't work like that. You have to tell it what exactly is a variable, which don't make a lot of sense because you're not used to telling things what. So when you think of text and you think of numbers, you don't think of them differently. You think of them as both text, cause you write numbers and you write text. That's not the way computers work. So, for variables, you must have a type, and then a name, and then a semicolon. All lines of code in Java. actually, I'll add it here. And every line of code must end with a semicolon. Why am I doing these notes is so if somebody's having my code pulled up on one monitor and they're doing their own thing, they can always look at my code and kind of get a brief description of what I was covering in that part of the video. So code always goes inside brackets no matter what, and every line of code must end with a semicolon. That's just the rules of Java. And what do I mean by code? So what is code? We keep throwing around this term and we don't really know what it is. Because I'm saying code, but right here, this don't end with a semicolon. That don't end with a semicolon. So code is for a line to be code, it must perform a function. Creating a variable is not performing a function. Technically, and this isn't really the definition of code. This is the definition we're going to be using. So yeah. So now this right here is how you would define a variable. You could just go int I. Nothing else. But let's say, I mean, that's kind of useless. We're just creating a variable and we're not doing anything with it. Like, what the hell is the point of creating a variable and not doing anything with it? Well, oh, it's even telling us the value of the local variable of I is not used. Well, let's go ahead and look at another way to make a variable. We can add equals, and then we can go ahead and put a value there. Always remember the semicolon. Equals 9. So now we have this variable 9. So I is 9. That's simple. And by default, it's equal to 0. We won't get in that. That can change. So, int I is equal to 9. So, that's kind of useless. We're not doing anything with this number. Oh, there's a nice little tip. Is if you want to just go ahead and not have to print out system.out.println, that's really hard to type and just a pain in the butt all around. You can just type sysout and press Control space. Once you get used to that early on, it's just so much better. Number. We'll call this number, because that's more creative. Okay. So, well, now our number is 9. Well, that's a quite useless program, isn't it? I mean, it literally just tells us our number is 9. But there's no real purpose. I'm confused. Why were we making this program again? Okay, can I pause this? Of course not. Okay, whatever. Well, I guess I'm just gonna hold him up B. Okay, so let's maybe see if we can do anything with this number. I want to turn off my air conditioner real quick. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. That is completely my fault, and I'm warning you the video quality, but screw it. Okay, so let's say we can not just not want to have a number. Maybe we want to do something with this number. So, how will we do something with this number? Well, let's think reasonably. It don't like that. It's giving us an error. And also, let's just think this from a mathematical point of view. What's the use of just adding 9 to number if we're never ever doing anything with the value? How about we do something like this? How about we set number, since we could set variables. Remember, right here. We'll go ahead and add that to our notes. And we don't, and as you can see here, we still don't have to put the type. Now, why don't we have to put the type? We don't have to put the type because it already knows the type. So we don't have to put a type there because we gave it the type earlier. So how about we go ahead and print it out again. So I'm just going to Control-C, Control-V that. And run it. So now we added 9 to it, which is quite boring. Let's divide by 3. See if we could do that. Well, let's add 5. And we could do whatever we want to this variable. This is our variable. So, let's have fun. Let's see. Let's see if we could get user input. Now, when I'm going to address user input, I'm going to bring up some quite advanced topics. And remember how we were talking about an object earlier when we had public class hello world? We're about to talk about another object. This isn't hello world. It's a default Java object called the scanner. And the scanner will call this variable user input. So it's type scanner. So right there, that's our type scanner. And it's going to give us an error. And I'll explain that later. And then this type will be user input. Meaning it's taking input, which is just a arbitrary name. We can have whatever. Then we can go ahead and say new scanner, and we'll go system.in, and I'll explain this here. So we're creating a variable of type scanner called user input. Oh, I forgot. Sorry, it's default to me. So import, we had to add the line of code import java.util.scanner, and Eclipse automatically does this for us just to make it convenient. And what does this mean? So Java comes with, so what we're doing is we're taking the scanner object from the Java standard library. That's it. So Java has this giant standard library, which I will show you the documentation for here. It may be completely awful. Okay, so Java has this massive standard library, which basically adds everything you would ever want, need, and or can imagine. We got Corba, whatever that is, sound, which I don't know. We might do something with sound and music and graphics and fancy shit like that later. Transactions, everything you could dream of is most likely somewhere in here. And this is going to look really confusing. It even looks kind of confusing to me. Like, this is DOM. DOM stands for document object something. Document object model. So you can like edit websites and stuff. Just really cool stuff that is free to use. It comes with Java by default. And your program is guaranteed 100% to have all this. This is for Java ASCII 7. So this is for an outdated version of Java. And Java 8 probably even has more. A lot of programming languages today are creating stuff like that. So what is a scanner? So, a scanner is an object that looks for a specified sequence of text. Now, we're not, as you can see by this, we're not specifying any sequence. By default, that is the line separator. So, remember the line separator from earlier? By default, it's the line separator. Because, I spelled that wrong, but it don't matter. By default, it's that because when you're typing in data, most of the time you press an enter when you actually want to enter the data in. Now, you can make it a T, you can make it an R, I mean, you can make it whatever you want. And I will show you how to do so. And it's called set.useDelimiter. And then go ahead and, I mean, if we really wanted to, we could use an R. But that's kind of stupid and pointless. Now, a scanner is always looking. This is always looking. Why is that important? Because when something's always running, that creates a bunch of extra CPU resources. So, you have to make it stop. And as I just wrote out, we have to stop it at the end of the program to avoid using up extra RAM and CPU. Again, very important. So now let's say we want user input. So remember how we could set a variable like this? Let's go ahead and try that. So we'll say string name. So we'll try and get the user's name. Next line. Now this is looking for this is going to get the next line that you give it. And as you can see, it's not giving you any kind of prompt, but we'll try this without the prompt. So now, this plus sign, what does that mean? That means I'm adding this string with that string. And that string with that string. That's honestly how it's simple. It's as simple as it is. The technical term is concatenation. But it's basically just adding. So that's a nice little example for you. Yeah, that's literally all it does. So let's run this and see what we get. Nothing. Okay. Well, let's just go ahead and type in our name. I mean, either way, it's always looking. So, oh hi. Okay. Well, let's make it have a prompt. So remember how we use systemout.println? That makes a line. What if we wanted just to ask the question? And we'll try it without the space at the end. But as you can see, the cursor is kind of in the wrong position. And that's kind of ugly. And you don't want that. So always add a space at the end. It's not really required. It's just good formatting and it's better. Hello. Hi. So, yeah. That's how that works. And this is the basics of Java. I tried to go in as much depth as I could on the syntax and how the programming language works, and I hope you guys understood it well. Oh, wrong button. And I will be posting this code somewhere online. I don't know where I'm going to post it, but I'll figure it out. So yeah, stop recording.